Kindly rise for the prayers. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with Thee know he is therefore one with every other. Please be seated and a few minutes of silence, please. Friends, the subject for this morning's symposium is compassion in different spiritual traditions. We have 3 speakers today before you. Brother Abraham Oron, who is sitting on the left, is the president of the Tel Aviv Lodge in Israel, which is directly attached to Adyar. He is a graduate in economics and political science and has been a keen student of theosophy since 1978. He is the editor of the theosophical magazine in Hebrew named Or, which means light. He will be speaking to us on compassion in Judaism, especially in the context of the Israel-Palestinian relationship. Brother Abraham.
Thank you. Good morning, friends. I would like to open my talk with a few words from the Psalms. I say it in Hebrew first and then translate in English. מי האיש חפץ חיים, אוהב ימים לראות טוב, נצור לשונך מרע, ושפתיך מדבר מרמה. סור מרע ועשה טוב, בקש שלום ורודפהו. In the translation, all you men who wishes for real life and real happiness, refrain thy tongue from evil and thy lips from untruth. Refrain from evil and do good. Seek and pursue peace. When I walked this morning along the path that is leading from Leadbeater Chambers to here, and saw all the beauty that is around, I could not but remember a few words from the Buddhist prayer: may all beings be happy. May all beings be free from misery. And this is actually the attitude of what we call the one life. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from misery. And all the beauty that we see comes from this compassionate heart, from this attitude that wants us, mortal beings living here, to be happy, to be really happy, to be really free from misery. Well, I'm not going to go into politics and to the Palestinian-Israeli relations. I would like to speak more about what is needed in order that we can develop this wonderful virtue, compassion, and maybe pass it on to others, because this is the hope of humanity. If we can connect more people to their own hearts. So, a few words about Judaism. So, in all main religions of the world, we find some teaching concerning compassion and loving kindness. And this is also the case for Judaism. There are 613 commandments in the Jewish religion, many of which are dealing with the way we should treat others. In general, you find very much known commandments, such as you should love your neighbor as you love yourself, or you should not do to others what you don't like being done to yourself. And at a more detailed level, there are commandments for helping the poor, for visiting the sick, comforting the mourners, and even gladdening the bride and groom in their marriage feast. As it is also in other countries, we have hundreds of philanthropic organizations that are related in some way to helping others, providing food, clothing, medical supplies, protect children and women in need, and more. Knowing the sad history of this land, one may ask, how can there be so many manifestations of charity and loving kindness along with the wars of hatred and hostility between two nations that are destined to live side by side? In the Mahatma letters to APC Net, letter number 8, Master K.H., Master of Wisdom and Compassion, acknowledges the sad situation of humanity. For it is humanity which is the great orphan, the only disinherited one upon this earth, my friend. And it is the duty of every man who is capable of unselfish impulse to do something, however little, for its welfare. Poor, poor humanity, says the Master. It reminds me of the old fable of the war between the body and its member. Here too, each limb of this huge orphan, fatherless and motherless, selfishly cares but for itself. The body uncared for suffers eternally, whether the limbs are at war or are at rest. Its suffering and agony never cease. But having a deep knowledge of the divine potential which lies dormant in the soul of man, he adds, since there is hope for men only in men, I would not let one cry whom I couldn't save. There are moments when difficult events caused by extremists on all sides, human beings immersed in ignorance and illusion, causes a person to lose the hope the Master is talking about. How can it be that with all the long history of destruction and suffering we still experience so much hatred and violence in many parts of the world? But when we stop for a moment and meditate on the sentence of the Master, there is hope for men, but in men, just stay with this sentence and observe the feeling that comes, especially maybe the feeling of despair. When you observe this feeling with compassion, these feelings dissolve and gradually begins to appear some bright spots that exist within this harsh reality. These sparks of light are in the groups of men and women, many of them young, who dedicate and even sacrifice their lives doing the sacred work of healing the sick in undeveloped countries, defending human rights of the oppressed, helping refugees and those who are trapped in fighting zones, those who fight ceaselessly against the ecological damage caused by governments and organizations, and help to prevent cruelty to animals. So many light workers who are really the hope of humanity, and who are really practicing compassion in action and universal responsibility. I would speculate that many of those who dedicate themselves to alleviating human suffering in all its forms have been influenced directly or indirectly by the principles of morality and spiritual philosophy of Hinduism, Buddhism, Theosophy, and many other currents influenced by these main spiritual traditions. Principles such as interconnectedness and unity of life, non-violence, non-duality have found their way into many spiritual groups and into psychology, psychotherapy, ecology, and even into quantum physics. Here we may ask how theosophy can play a greater part in expanding the circle of those who can feel this interconnectedness and the urge to save humanity. How can we make these principles, who are inherent in theosophy, more practical and friendly? All the wonderful teachings of theosophy about the hidden aspects of nature and man, about laws of nature such as reincarnation, karma, evolution of consciousness, periodicity, and other teachings dealing with the creation of the universe and man, and many others, are all, to my point of view, forming the whole of learning. The whole of learning that leads to the whole of wisdom, or to the realization that one has to concentrate all his energies on freeing oneself from separateness. And this consists mainly in the development of the quality of a wide open heart, of feeling close to others, really sharing their pains and joys, and to be able to work for their well-being. This realization or active compassion is, to my point of view, the aim of spiritual life. The importance of this quality is expressed in the following two quotations. The first from At the Feet of the Master. Of all the qualifications, love is the most important, for if it is strong enough, in man it forces him to acquire all the rest, and all the rest without it would never be sufficient. Most of us will agree with this saying, but how many of us, including the speaker, are willing to abandon learning and concentrate all their efforts on the realization of their inner love nature? Well, we have to ponder about it. Are we ready? Are we ready to do this quantic jumps from the whole of learning to the whole of wisdom? The second quotation is made by Madame Blavatsky in The Voice of Silence, in which compassion is defined as the law of laws. Canst thou destroy divine compassion? Compassion is no attribute, it is the law of laws, eternal harmony, alias self, a shoreless universal essence, the light of everlasting right and fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. The more dost become one with it, thy being melted in its being, the more thy soul unites with that which is, the more thou will become compassion absolute. I think the way to develop compassion is to meditate on these very, very, very deep ideas and try to form within ourselves a desire, a very deep desire that compassion will be born within us, because it is our true nature. It is in us. But what prevents it? from being more expressed, from being more manifested. Well, aren't these quotations and many more found throughout the theosophical books trying to awake us to concentrate our study and practice on development of true compassion? Only practical brotherhood and compassion can transform us and society. Could it be that many of us are too attracted to the whole of learning? And this may be the cause of further difficulties the Theosophical Society have in reaching larger parts of society, and especially the young generation. All the separative tendencies, hatred and violence in the world calls for the healing powers of true brotherhood and compassion. Can we find new ways of teaching theosophy so that the principles of theosophy will be channeled and focused on study, meditation, and practices for the development of compassion and brotherhood? We must find ways to demonstrate the truth that only true compassion and brotherhood, inner peace and happiness can be found. Can we see ourselves this truth? Can we really believe in it? There is a simple exercise which we use in the courses we give on practical ways to deal with harmful emotions, which helps to experience this truth. What we have to do is just close our eyes for a moment and think about someone who made us angry sometime in the past. And just observe the unpleasant sensations in our body. And then think about someone we love and see how good it feels at the level of the body. People have to feel this in their own body. And it is so simple. We can find many other simple practices, experiences, which can help people feel the teaching, feel this truth. The knowledge of theosophy gives us a very good basis for demonstrating through analogous exercises, dialogue, and meditation practices the truth expressed in the following words of wisdom by the Buddha, all of which deals with the essential attitude needed for development of compassion and inner peace. And these are really unforgettable words of the Buddha at the opening of Dhammapada. All that we are is a result of what we have taught. It's founded on our thought. It is made of our thoughts. If a man speaks or acts with evil thought, pain follows him as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draw the carriage. All that we are is a result of what we have taught. It is found of our thought. It is made of our thought. If man speaks or acts with pure thought, happiness follows him like a shadow that never leaves him. Well, I won't read, but only it's. I won't read all this passage, but only at the end of it we find, for hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. Hatred ceases by love. This is an old rule. Where is love or compassion that eradicate hatred can be found? It can be found deep within because it is our own true nature. But we have to make space for it. So long we are filled with self and all its desires and fears, it cannot appear. The making of space for compassion to be born within us is a result of a long process of deep inner observation, combined with a willingness to meet our accumulated anger, fear, loneliness, frustration, and feel with compassion all the pain which is held in these emotions. We can combine, on the other hand, we can combine this inner observation with a loving kindness meditation on the following words from the voice of the silence and remind ourselves of the many forms of suffering we see and hear about us. Let the suffering of the world touch our heart. Live with an open heart. And the word of Madame Blavatsky, let not the fire sun dry one tear of pain before thyself has wiped it from the sufferer eye. But let each burning human tear drop on thy heart, and there remains, nor ever brush it off until the pain that causes it is removed. I am finishing in a moment. The question still remains, how can I bring a greater part of my nation to understand and apply these truths in relation to those who belong to other nations or religions? In the teachings of theosophy in Hinduism, we learn that this situation of ignorance, separation, and illusion in which is most of humanity today is vital for the development of individual human consciousness. All sparks of consciousness that fall from a state of unconscious unity to a state of separation and suffering that goes with it, so that they can return in some future fully conscious to the unity and wholeness which is their true home. Should we take comfort in this knowledge and let nature and karma do the work of evolution, leading after countless eons of suffering to that enlightenment after which illusion and separateness will be eradicated? Or may we awaken ourselves to understand and see that everyone who comes to theosophy or to any true spiritual path must become sooner or later an emissary of nature and karma, without which the work of evolution of human consciousness cannot be realized. Every human being is in his essence a bridge between heaven and earth. All who are even somewhat aware of being such a meeting point between spirit and matter, heaven and earth, are mankind's hope for change and towards true humanity. The universe expects such people to take responsibility, to be their brother's keepers, and tirelessly teach and be models of love and wisdom. How do we and others around the world wake up to vigorous, effective action, demonstrating the vitality of developing compassion for the happiness and prosperity of humanity? Let us focus in theosophy on the path of the heart, on those truths which it is written as it is written in light on the path. These truths, which are as great as is life itself, are as simple as the simplest mind of man. Feed the hunger with them. Can we feed the world with these truths? By doing more to simplify and popularize theosophy, and focusing on the teachings which motivate towards more compassionate and brotherly living. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brother Abraham, covering a lot of ground. Our next speaker this morning is Sister Mirva Jaatinen. Since March 2015, she is the General Secretary of the Theosophical Society in Finland, which also includes Estonia. Prior to that, she was the Secretary of the section from 2001 to 2015, with a break of 2 years in between. She has a bachelor's degree in music and has been a student of theosophy since 1993. She has given lectures on theosophical topics and has also served as an interpreter for the theosophical speakers from abroad. She works as a daycare teacher with small children. She will speak to us about compassion in Buddhism, especially in Tibetan Buddhism. Sister Mirva.
Good morning, dear friends, both here and online all around the world. Yes, indeed, I had planned to talk about compassion in Buddhism, especially in Mahayana Buddhism and the way it's taught in Tibetan tradition. I had a slight fear, though, that by the time we come to this symposium day, everything would have been said already. And guess what? I was right. Everything has been said already, starting from the first day with Linda, as she covered part of what I had planned to say. The second day comes Kim Ju, and very thoroughly covered the rest of what I had to say. And on every day. So I changed my plans accordingly, finally almost considering that we might just have a 15-minute silent meditation on compassion instead of me repeating. But as I think I'm required to say something anyway, so I'll now cover some of the basic things you've already heard related to compassion from Tibetan Buddhist perspective. And then at the end, I would like to engage you a little bit with meditation, analytical meditation or pondering. I hope this is all right with you. Not that I'm going to give you any other alternative, except if you don't like to do that, you can take a nap. So, Tibetan Buddhism presents a very clear definition of compassion, which is that it's a very strong aspiration or motivation to free other sentient beings from their suffering and sources of suffering. This is such a strong and compelling feeling that a person who has such a great compassion, meaning really great compassion, he or she can't bear not to help other suffering sentient beings. There's no other choice for such a person, meaning a bodhisattva, but to do everything he or she can to alleviate the sufferings of others. Intimately linked with compassion is loving kindness or unconditional love, which is a strong aspiration or motivation to bring or to give happiness and its causes for other sentient beings. And there's equally here, for a bodhisattva, this is as compelling as the need to alleviate suffering. However, if we consider our so-called compassion in our everyday lives, or at least if I consider mine, I have to confess that it's quite limited. Of course, we naturally wish that our near and dear ones, mostly meaning our family and friends, close friends, that they don't suffer. And we worry if they do suffer. We wish we could do something to help, and we do try to help them. But this is still very much linked with attachment. Whereas towards so-called neutral people, meaning people whom we don't know, our compassion isn't the same anymore. Their suffering we can ignore and forget much more easily. Not to mention people we don't like or might even hate or possibly even consider as our enemies. Toward them it's very, very difficult to be compassionate, if not even impossible. So this kind of compassion has limits. It covers only a limited number of people, of sentient beings, and is definitely still very biased. It's not the great compassion yet, since great compassion, as we heard from Kim Du earlier, is limitless. So what do? The first thing we need to develop when trying to get closer to the great compassion is equanimity, which has been mentioned here very often, I think. And equanimity is said to be a state in which all attitudes of attachment and anger toward any sentient being, irrespective of who they are overcome. This is the supreme kind of equanimity. Venerable Lobsang Gyatso says in his book Bodhicitta that if in the fertile ground of equanimity you plant the seed of recognition of your mothers, and nourish it with the water of reflecting upon and resolving to repay their kindness, the sprout of affectionate love and compassion will flourish like a crop in season. When we see how difficult it is to develop the great compassion, we may feel overwhelmed and even lose our hope. But as said by many of the other speakers, everything is interconnected, interrelated, and that applies also to practicing compassion. And we can start the practice with baby steps, doing anything we can in our daily lives to help others. Starting with simple things, very simple things, like opening doors for others, giving a seat in a bus for someone else, etc. Simply smiling, as someone else also mentioned earlier. Anything which will take us towards other-centeredness instead of self-centeredness. And when we start doing this, it will help to change our attitude, little by little, and we'll be able to do more and more for others. And life will surely present us plenty of opportunities to do this. The mind training practices in Tibetan Buddhism can be condensed into 2 pieces of advice. The first one, if you can, try to help others. And the second one, if you can't help, at least don't harm them. Well, of course, we do need to understand what suffering is, as Kim Du said. And we need to develop wisdom, which means understanding reality as it is, meaning realizing emptiness. But I'm not going to talk more about these here, as she very nicely covered the whole thing. Then there are the 6 paramitas, or the 6 perfections. Wisdom is one of them. These are also linked with compassion, or practicing, generating compassion. First one is generosity. This is linked with love in a way that we learn to give happiness to others in various different ways. Generosity. Then ethics. This is directly linked with compassion and suffering, because if we are ethical, of course we no longer cause suffering for others, at least not deliberately. Then there's patience. Well, we all know we need patience, right? Then there's joyful effort. This is also very important, because if we lose our hope, if we become depressed and think that we cannot do this, we lose our energy. So we have to have this joyful effort, realizing that we are already happy and fortunate that we are alive, we can practice, we can do many, many things. Then there's meditation and wisdom. Meditation is linked with wisdom in a way that with meditation, we deepen our wisdom. There are many different meditations presented in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition which are related to compassion. Like the Tonglen meditation, which is the giving and taking meditation, where you breathe in others' suffering and breathe out for them the causes of your own happiness. Then there is the 7-point cause and effect instruction, which is to develop bodhicitta, but also includes compassion. And there are many, many different techniques you can use. There's a wonderful book by the Dalai Lama, one of many, called How to Be Compassionate, a handbook for creating inner peace and happier world, where he presents many different simple analytical pondering meditation practices. And from there, I'm quoting the following. As I thought that today we could have a short meditative pondering related with equanimity, as that is needed in the beginning as a good foundation on which compassion can then be developed. So now I would like to ask you to sit comfortably. The ones who don't want to do this, now is the time for your nap. So, you may close your eyes if you so wish. First, notice how you have a natural sense of I. Like, I want this, I don't want that. And then recognize that it's natural to want happiness and not to want suffering. Now, based on this natural desire, you have the right to find happiness and get rid of suffering. And just as you have this right, others have the same right as well. Now think about the fact that the only difference between yourself and others is that you are only one person, whereas on this planet there are numerous other living sentient beings. And now ask from yourself, should I use all other living creatures in gaining happiness for myself? Or should I help others to find happiness? Then imagine yourself as being peaceful and rational and watching another version of yourself who is standing on your right side. This other self is terribly proud and never thinks of others' welfare. He or she only thinks about him or herself. Then imagine on your left a group of people who are strangers to you, who are poor and live in destitution, and who suffer. You in the middle are an unbiased, rational human being. Be aware that these people on your both sides want to be happy and want to get rid of suffering. In this sense, they're equal. They're alike. But now notice how this person on the right, motivated by selfishness, is only one. Whereas on your left, there are many more people. Which side is more important? The one selfish person or the group of poor and helpless people? On which side do you dedicate your energy? Now ponder about the following. If I, as one single person, were to take advantage of a group of people, that would be against humaneness and reasonable behavior. It's stupid to sacrifice much for little. And as you think this way, you make a decision that I'm going to direct my energy for the benefit of many instead of this one selfish person. Now, thank you for this short meditation. I would like to conclude with a short prayer, which His Holiness the Dalai Lama says to have helped him to remember his vow on altruism when he was undergoing difficult times. This is a verse from the Bodhisattva vow. For as long as space endures, and as long as sentient beings remain, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Mirva, and thank you for that little meditation. Friends, my co-speakers have covered much ground already, and time permitting, I wanted to touch upon compassion in a few other religions, but I recognize that may not be possible. Maybe what I wanted to say, I'll send it with our miss, and maybe she would publish it in the Theosophist. But one thing that I wanted to say, and Sister Linda had already mentioned about it, more than we speak about compassion, more than we write about compassion, and we hear about compassion, I think we should be compassionate in our daily life. That is the most important message that we get from all the spiritual traditions as well as from theosophy. So kindly permit me to overrun our time limit of 9 o'clock, as I do intend to take you through how compassion is dealt in various religious traditions. It is a virtue in every major tradition and is also central to each religion. Compassion implies a feeling of oneness with the other, not merely feeling pity for somebody. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, compassion is equated with karuna, a term that has been already introduced to you. A different expression, daya, is used to imply mercy, kindness, and sometimes pity. Some of these expressions are often used interchangeably due to lack of clarity and deeper understanding. Theosophical teachings greatly value the virtue of compassion for spiritual growth and enlightenment. In the Voice of the Silence, which is a great and final gift of HPV to all of us, and it has been mentioned quite a few times, that compassion is no attribute. It's not a quality that we can acquire and give up. It is our true self. It has also been repeated many times that compassion is the law of laws, and not only law of the divine laws, the basis of divine laws, but also basis of all natural laws, and it should be the basis of all man-made laws. Most of the time the man-made laws are retributive. You do something and you have to be punished for doing something wrong. But I suppose the lawmakers, the law enforcers and the judges must keep it in their mind that compassion is the basis of all laws. In the Laws of the Higher Life, Dr. Besant says, every scripture declares that the heart of the divine life is infinite compassion. Compassionate then must be the spiritual man. And we are examining how compassion is dealt in different religions because it is so important. Let me take you through how it is dealt in Hinduism. In classical Hindu literature, compassion is recognized as a great virtue and are expressed in different terms, the most common ones being karuna, daya and anukampa. Karuna particularly implies an effort to understand others from their perspective. Words like karuna sindhu, ocean of compassion, and karuna nidhana, abode of compassion, are the very names given to the important Hindu deities like Krishna and Rama. As you know, Buddha came to be also recognized subsequently as one of the 10 avatars or incarnations of the Hindu deity Vishnu. The Dasavatara Stotra, hymn to 10 avatars, eulogizes Buddha's compassion and the steps he took to stop animal sacrifice. These examples amply demonstrate that karuna as a virtue is given the highest importance in Hinduism. The Vedic texts enjoin extending compassion not only to human beings but to every other living being. Compassion is a state in which one sees all living beings as part of one's own self, and everyone's suffering is seen as one's own suffering. It is extended to all, including those who are strangers and even those who may be inimical. Daya is defined in the Padma Purana as the virtuous desire to mitigate sorrow and difficulties of others by putting forth whatever efforts are necessary. Anukampa, a similar expression, refers to one's state after one has observed and understood the pain and suffering in others. Therefore, compassion is not pity, kripa, as the former, that is, the compassion implies feeling of oneness with the sufferer, whereas pity may be out of mercy, merely feeling sorry for another, accompanied by condescension. One may feel pity for someone who might have done a wrong thing or committed a crime. An ancient Hindu Tamil text, Tirukural, which is very popular in South India, says, "Find and follow the good path and be ruled by compassion. For if the various ways are examined, compassion will prove the means to liberation." Patanjali in his Yoga Sutra highlights the importance of compassion, that is karuna, along with three other virtues, namely Maitri, Mudita and Upeksha. Incidentally, these four are also emphasized in Buddhism, as Sister Linda the other day mentioned. Let's take the case of Sikhism. This is another religion. It equally considers compassion to be a great virtue. Guru Granth Sahib goes on to say, "You have no compassion, the Lord's light doesn't shine in you. You are drowned in worldly entanglements." A Sikh is enjoined to feel the pain and suffering of other people involved in any tragedy, and compassion is considered to be a divine quality. In the Sikh scripture, the God is called Mahadail, super compassionate, and Dayal Dev, merciful God. In Jainism also, it is emphasized that observance of verbal and mental compassion is recommended in addition to compassion for all living beings. Lord Mahavira adopted supreme compassion in his life even towards poisonous snakes. The Jain tenet Ahimsa Paramo Dharma stems from compassion for all, which enjoins living beings to render service to one another. Let's come to Christianity. The Hebrew and Greek words translated as compassion in the Bible mean to feel sympathy, to have mercy and to have pity. The Bible describes God as compassionate and gracious, abounding in love, and His compassion is described as unfailing, infinite and eternal. Compassion is said to arise within us when we are confronted with those who suffer, and it produces action to alleviate their suffering. In Christian literature, to be compassionate is also equated with to be tender-hearted and to act kindly. God's compassion is given freely and tenderly, like the mother's compassion for a child. God's compassion is characterized by acts of kindness and concern for human suffering. Duty towards God in Christian literature includes compassionate care for people, including neighbors, and Christ is considered to be the father of compassion, characterized by notions of tenderness and affection, and the believers are required to be imitators of Christ, to live a life of love and care for others. Turning to Islam. Islam is much misunderstood today because of the horrendous acts of terrorism by some. Many people, both non-Muslims and as well as Muslims, wrongly think that the concept of jihad is central to Islam. However, this is not true. Firstly, jihad literally means striving to serve the purposes of God. It is understood that jihad encompasses religious duties to maintain the religion, as well as inner spiritual struggle, and the later being more important, that is the inner struggle. Secondly, it is compassion which represents the true spirit of Islam, as in the case of other spiritual traditions. In the Islamic tradition, Allah is referred to as the merciful and compassionate. In the Arabic language in which the Quran is written, the words used are Rahman and Rahim. 113 chapters of the Quran out of 114 begin with the verse, "In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful." The Muslims are urged in their scriptures to show compassion towards everyone, including the poor, the widows, the orphans, and even the captives. They pay zakat, mandatory giving, as against sadaqah, voluntary giving, which goes to help the poor and the needy. When they fast during the month of Ramadan, it helps them to empathize with the hunger pangs of the less fortunate, and it enhances their sensitivity to the suffering of others. Prophet Muhammad is referred to as the mercy of the world. He is quoted as saying, God is more loving and kind than a mother to her dear child. As in the case of other traditions, in the Islamic traditions also, compassion which implies suffering with others is considered to be a virtue. It is said in the Quran that God has created man in His image, and among all His divine qualities, compassion and mercy are considered to be the highest. Therefore, for a Muslim, compassion and mercy becomes highest ideals to be realized. There is no doubt that compassion occupies a central place in Islam, along with the virtues of loving, caring, and showing mercy towards everyone in God's creation. The Quran particularly emphasizes compassion to parents, children, spouse, relatives, orphans, sick and suffering, neighbors and wayfarers. The Sufis lay great importance on compassion, and their very fundamental doctrine is called Sulh-i-Kul, peace with all, which in other words means no violence and no aggressiveness. Brother Abraham has already spoken about compassion in Judaism. I would like to add that in the Jewish tradition, God is invoked as the father of compassion, and hence is referred to as compassionate or Rahmana. The rabbis speak of the 13 attributes of compassion. The conception of compassion is likened to a feeling of the parent for the child. The word Rihim comes from the Hebrew word Rehem, the mother. In Judaism, compassion includes sorrow and pity for one in distress, creating a desire to relieve, and lack of compassion is characterized as cruelty. Judaism uses words like compassion, empathy, altruism, and love interchangeably. However, in-depth examination makes it clear that compassion is more than simply a human emotion. Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition, puts it this way: kindness gives to Ananda. Compassion knows no other. You feel oneness with the other. It's not like kindness to being shown to Ananda. It is also said that compassion is the basis of love. Sister Mirva has already spoken about compassion in Buddhism, as also other speakers previously. I may add that compassion or karuna is at the very heart of Buddha's teachings. When he was asked by Ananda, his favorite disciple, as to whether cultivation of loving kindness and compassion is a part of our practice, Buddha replied in the negative. He said, cultivation of loving kindness and compassion is not a part of our practice, but is all of our practice. It is said that the ultimate wish of the Buddha was to relieve the suffering of all living beings everywhere. The Dalai Lama says, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. In Buddhism, loving kindness, that is metta in Pali or Maitri, and compassion are complementary virtues. The first one, that is loving kindness, has the characteristic of wishing for the happiness and welfare of others, whereas compassion or karuna has the characteristic of wishing others to be free from suffering, which is extended to all living beings. One requires others to be happy and the other relieves the suffering. So therefore metta and karuna, they go together. Concluding, in most traditions, compassion is differentiated from pity. While pity may be condescending, compassion arises from a sense of equality and interconnectedness of life. Compassion presupposes respect for dignity of life, ours as well as others. As such, compassion has little to do with sentimentality or mere pity, which springs from emotion, and sentimentality alone cannot relieve suffering and bring joy. On the other hand, compassion belongs to a higher spiritual level which arises from prajna or wisdom. In fact, wisdom and compassion go together and you cannot have one without the other. It is through wisdom, understanding, prajna that one understands the suffering of others, and through compassion one helps to remove that suffering. The enlightened ones remain with us as teachers and liberators because of their immense compassion, karuna. The great ones can truly be described as compassion embodied. We are told that the quickest way to spiritual growth is the path of compassion. And the reason why this is so is not difficult to guess. Through compassion, we put to use our noblest and loftiest and most divine faculties. We assume responsibility towards one and all, universal responsibility if we wish, and that leads to end of separateness. A state of non-separateness, identification with all, is a sure indication of wisdom. Compassion, universal responsibility, non-separateness and wisdom are multiple facets of spiritual life. That is to say, theosophy as also spiritual traditions without exception enjoin us to be compassionate. We are beyond 9 o'clock, I am sorry for that, but compassion in all religions has so much to cover. I thank you all, and on your behalf and on my behalf, I also thank both our speakers, Brother Abraham and Sister Mirva, for contributing to this symposium. We close the session now.